screens and technicalities on computer and PowerPoints. Welcome to the NORA Summit, and thank you all for being here. Hopefully you all took the stairs after that. And now I realize I should not have had that biscuit and gravy, but I didn't see any fruit, so we'll have to put that in your survey.
That was quite breakfast for a healthy
Power through. So this is similar to your first day in a college class. If you're not here for raising revenue through retail engagement, you're in the wrong room. There are a lot of other great workshops going on. NORA, on a regular basis, consistently has retail as part of its theme, because as we all know, in Oklahoma, every town and city is funded primarily through sales tax. And so it's been an interesting shift. Last year we had a panel in which we had talked about that shift that had happened from chasing smokestack industries to now celebrating retail announcements. 25 years ago, there weren't ribbon cuttings at retail establishments, and now Chick-fil-A hosts almost a half-day gathering in Claremore for their opportunity to win free chicken for a year. So my, how things have changed. We've got a great panel up here today, and each one of the panelists are going to give you a different perspective as to really what the most important aspect of the description of this is, focusing on your existing businesses. We do have a workshop this afternoon in which you will hear a different perspective on recruiting new retail to your area if you're interested in that. But today is really about existing business and a little bit about the changing landscape of retail. My name is Brian Hunt. I'm with Cherokee Nation Businesses, and I'm in their real estate department. And one of the projects that I've been working on for the last 3 years is Cherokee Springs Plaza, which is just down the road. So it's a large mixed-use development. It's one of the first times we've taken a casino and made the casino an anchor rather than somewhat of an island to itself. And in that, we have land in the front that is still in fee simple land. So sales tax and ad valorem still applies to the city of Tahlequah for the Buffalo Wild Wings, the Taco Bueno, the Second Sonic store, the Ford dealership, and hopefully some more announcements to come in the future. So with that, we'll go ahead and get kicked off on the panel. Let me read the bio of, I think, Lynn, did you want to go first?
I'm happy to.
Okay, that'd be great. Let me introduce you guys to Lynn Wilson. She has championed economic development for 15 years, and over the past 5 years has specifically focused in Native communities across the country. Her work is focused on providing entrepreneurial training, business counseling, economic, demographic, and social research related to economic development, which is so important. Through her firm, Red Fern Research Services, she provides market research, grant writing, and other economic development services to Native businesses and economic development organizations. Before I let you get started, let me just power through just a couple of slides.
You're good.
Talking about the change in the retail landscape. So there's the panel. John will go next with Claremore, and then Stephen with Cherokee Nation. And this is an example of just 4 headlines that I picked up from last spring into the summer. You would think that retail is over. They were calling it the retail apocalypse. Nobody would ever shop in another store ever again. And so these are the kinds of headlines, though, that do have an impact on retailers and consumer confidence. And so we'll walk through a little bit of that. But the good news is, like most news, it's not necessarily all true. And this was one of the ugly slides from last spring when a lot of these stores were either filing bankruptcy or were announcing closures. And someone asked, I've heard someone comment in another presentation on retail, are these really the stores that any of you all in this room were shopping at? Perhaps you were, but if you'd been to a Sears in the last several years, it was not what it was 25 or 40 years ago. Same with JCPenney, Payless, and Radio Shack. The good news, however, is that despite all the bad news, there are still stores opening. And so for each store that's closing, 2.7 stores are opening. And you can see kind of the breakout. This is from, I believe, the National Retail Federation. So obviously, Sam's Clubs and Costco's are still progressing. Convenience stores, you'll hear, if you want to come back this afternoon, we'll have Casey's General Stores on our panel on what they're doing in Oklahoma and how they make decisions. But you can kind of see how things start to break out. And of course, restaurants have been on a great run in the last several years, especially local entrepreneurs that can deliver a quality dining experience. And then, kind of the usual suspects, but you'll see some of these trends throughout some of the remarks you'll hear today. Discount stores are still doing fairly well. The Dollar Generals, the Rosses, the TJ Maxx's, Dick's Sporting Goods. What you don't see are the traditional retailers that we're used to of those days past. This is just a quick outline of a couple of trends from ICSC, the International International Council of Shopping Centers. As most of you you may be counting your steps. Wearable technology is huge right now. Athleisure. I saw a bumper sticker the other day that said, "My yoga pants don't do yoga," or something to that effect.
I need a shirt that says that.
Health and fitness, which of course we heard from our keynote today. You're starting to see a lot more healthcare facilities. The Aspen Dentals of the world go into retail type settings. And then some of the things that are struggling, U.S. department stores, luxury goods are not growing. They are growing, but at a much slower rate. So apparently millennials don't like diamonds, is what somebody told me. Travel, retail, lots of impacts with currency. And then of course e-commerce continues to be disruptive, but can also be embraced. So I think with that walks me through the slides that we had to kind of set the stage. And with that, Lynn, I'll let you take over and give you about your remarks about 15 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That'll be fine. So I think that there's going to be, several different approaches to talking about retail development and what your community can do to build retail, attract the retailers, and retain them in your community. Now, being from Northeast Oklahoma all of my life, I know that there are small rural communities that, maybe you are not able to attract a lot of those larger retails. So some of our communities just simply, they don't have the demographic to support that type of thing. And it's very important in those instances that you really embrace the opportunity to grow businesses from the people that are living in your community, to support those independent retailers that are out there. Because to me, especially in a smaller rural community, it's those small independent retailers that are probably going to be, a lot more important, because you're not going to have the big box stores and that type of retail base. And so that's really where my work and everything focuses on. So I really think that whenever you're creating a foundation to build retail development within your rural community, that it really has to start at the top. It has to start with the leadership. It has to start with, the city government and the leaders that have the power to make the community a business-friendly climate. And this is often done, as many of you know, through a variety of different sources. But I'll get back to that here in just a minute. But creating that foundation to support local businesses, starting at the top, make sure that businesses are supported through different things like technical assistance and training is going to be very important for the rural communities, and making sure that those rural independent retail people have access to resources and tools, which is going to help them make better decisions, because they just don't have the staff. They don't have the access that a lot of retailers do. And so I think that's one thing we really need to make sure that they have those resources. And so now I'll talk about a few different strategies that stakeholders in your rural community can take to improve this. So first of all would be, our city government, as I said. It really, I do think, has to start with you. And now many of you may remember several years ago, and John, I know you were in Owasso, but you probably even remember this, that the Claremore community went through a process to become more entrepreneur friendly, because the business climate at that time in our community was not real favorable, and we had a little bit of a bad image when it comes to the small businesses. But the city leaders really did come together, and they started a process to make those kind of changes and to give a lot more support to the smaller rural businesses, not just in retail, but in a lot of businesses. And they did some very simple things, and I think one of the things that a small community really needs to start with is making sure the information is available to people. I remember, for those of you that don't know me, I was for 10 years at the Rogers State University Innovation Center. And so we worked with a lot of small businesses. If people wanted to start a business, we were the people to help them do that. If they were running a business and were coming across some kind of, issues in management and operations, they would come to us and we would help them through that. Well, one of the things that we noticed and would hear is a new entrepreneur in the community would be like, man, it's just been hard for me to figure out where to start. I decided I want to open a business, so I go to the city and say, hey, I want to start a new business in Claremore. What do I need to do? Oh, well, you need to go talk to the people over at the county. So they go over to the county people, and the county says, you need to go to the city. And we realized there was this big disconnect, right? And these entrepreneurs really didn't know where to go. Even though, sometimes I was amazed. I was like, we had this jewel sitting up on top of the hill there at the university of people in my department. And it's like, we're here to help you do that. But, some people didn't realize we were there. So that was kind of, some of the things that spurred Claremore to go through this process. And there was a lot involved in making Claremore, I guess what you would call the entrepreneur-friendly community. But even smaller communities, just one of the simple things that Claremore did is they took a step to develop kind of a resource page on their website. And it's still there today. So if you want to start a business in Claremore and you go to the city website, it's going to have information there. How do you even start a business? Okay, some of the basics, get your federal employee identification number. What types of things that you need to be aware of whenever you're starting a business specifically in Claremore, because there's going to be some differences between communities. It says on there, who do you need to contact? So if you need, fire inspection, it's going to have that contact information there. And for all of the other people, it has contact information on, oh, do you need some small business training or technical assistance? Well, here's where you go to get that. And it also covers, different services that are available to them. So this was a very easy step for Claremore to take. But now I know that when people come to our community and they think they want to start a business, there's information there. And I'm pretty certain I know that at the time, even all the city employees were part of this process. We realized that a lot of times when someone wanted to start a business, one of the first places they would do, they'd find a location, and then they'd go down to the utility office to get the utilities turned on. So one of the things that the city did is we actually had literature at the utility department that let entrepreneurs know, hey, if you're starting a business here, here's some resources available to you. So it's really just making that connection and making sure that the information is out there. So that's a very simple thing for communities to do. And a lot of the work that I do are with small native tribes, in fact, on reservation. You think a rural community is difficult when it comes to economic development. Reservations are just a whole other beast. But you know, we even start with that simple process there, because as we were going on reservation, talking to people who wanted to start businesses, even they, within their own tribal administration, say, we have no information. You know, we don't know who to talk to, even within their own administration. So that's honestly the basic, that's the place that I always start when working with these tribes or any other community, is just making sure that you have a place to get the information out to your community members. And then, of course, you know, there's also some other things that communities need to recognize and work on: planning, zoning, you know, licensing. I know that one of the really big issues that small businesses faced in our community was the signage regulations. And I think there was some things that were developed that improved that and made that process a little easier. Because what you want to do as a community, you don't want to put hurdles in front of people who want to start businesses. You want to give them the information, and you want to be able to make the process very streamlined so they can get up and running as fast as they can and not have to go through a lot of bureaucracy or being switched back and forth because nobody knows which department that they need to talk to. And finally, giving the small businesses a voice at the table to make sure that perhaps you have a committee of small business owners that act as a council for your mayor, your city councilors, so that those small businesses can make sure that the community leaders are kept up to date on the issues that are affecting the small businesses. But economic development is not just, you know, the responsibility of city leaders. You know, I think there's also ways that community organizations can become involved in the process. So, you know, if you have a leadership group, how many of you have leadership programs in your community? Well, I know, of course, in Claremore, you know, we have a leadership group. It's actually for the county leadership, Rogers County. And we always have an economic development day incorporated into that. And I don't know if they've changed their program, but one thing that leadership or civic communities can do is also include some education component into their programs. So I think teaching people how important it is to shop local, because, you know, a lot of our community members really don't realize that whenever they're spending money outside of community, what it's really doing to their hometown. And so they need to understand that, what does it mean when I spend $1 in my community? How is that dollar multiplied and improved? What happens if we're able to bring tourists into our community? That brings new money in, which is there generating wealth and making our communities a little bit stronger. Chambers of Commerce, I throw kind of in under this because I think chambers of commerce, some of them are ran really, really well, but I think a lot of chambers really need to embrace the opportunity to help their small business owners just a little bit more, whether, you know, it doesn't mean that the chamber needs to provide training, but there are people like NTC and Cherokee Nation that are providing training, and those chambers of commerce really should be keeping an eye on that and distributing that information to their community members so that the community members are aware, hey, there's this training going on, or, you know what, there is technical assistance available, and understanding who in the region that they can point those people to. As business counseling was obviously one of my duties at the Innovation Center, and a lot of times when an entrepreneur come in, you know, one of the first things they're going to need is capital, right? They need financing. And one of my first questions would always be, are you native? And I had my fingers crossed under my desk. I'm just like, please say you're native, because, you know, when it comes to the funding, I think that I can help you out there, because I know somewhere I can direct them to. And then, you know, retailers themselves, have a responsibility. And they can't look toward, even the city or other people in the community to make their business work. I think it really takes an effort on the part of the small retailers in your community to band together and support one another. And I was actually reading a story about a community that was doing this, and some of the different ways they were accomplishing this, like they were sharing major advertising expenses. So there was a particular, I think maybe it was a travel magazine or something like that all the community retailers would band together and pay $80 a month to have this really nice ad appear in this. Now, the ad was not specific to their business, but what it was doing is they know, hey, if we can get people to our community, then we can get them here to spend money. So that's one way I think that retailers can really work together. And even promoting one another, which I don't see very often enough. That if you're a small boutique downtown, you're selling women's clothes, and you have an email and you're sending something out, hey, we got this great sale coming up. Well, you know what? There may be a men's store that's also having a sale in your community. You need to be supporting each other and telling people that. So just making that effort, this was something I read that I thought was really interesting, is that the retailers in that community make a conscious effort to carry complementary services so that they're not all doing the same thing and competing for exactly the same group of people. And so those retailers, they really do have a group, and they know what each other carries, and they try to diversify. And as we know in anything that we do, whether it's investing our money in different things, you have to diversify. And I think that they're really doing that very well in their retail sector. Some other things, that they were doing that I thought was interesting, they have kind of a private group, and the retailers, if there's a snowstorm coming up, it's like, okay guys, what's the plans? Is who's gonna open? Because they understood that in order to keep people coming to their community and shopping, especially if you're talking about bringing in tourists who may be traveling quite a ways, they don't want to come to your community and half the stores be closed, half the stores be open. So there really has to be some consistency within your retail sector for them to work together and kind of have common open hours, and plan for things like holiday shopping hours. I think that was a great example there. But most importantly, if you're a small business retailer, and I smile at my friend Suzanne because she's got the most fantastic boutique in Vining, Oklahoma, that is just amazing and doing gangbusters. But this is one thing that I do know about Suzanne and that she does is the success or failure of your business really does, most of it depends on you. So as a retailer, you're going to have to educate yourself, and you're going to have to take advantage of technical assistance, and you're going to have to take advantage of the training that's offered out there to you. And I'll tell you, a lot of times, I used to have a restaurant business. And I remember one time someone was writing in my bio, yeah, Lynn ran a successful, and I was like, you know what, quit saying that because my restaurant wasn't successful. If it was that successful, I'd still be doing it. It was an absolute disaster. I was a failure at that. And that's okay because I learned from that experience what I need to do. And so now I have another business and I can take all those mistakes that I've learned. And one of the things that I truly do is I'm constantly educating myself and making sure that I'm taking advantage of any technical assistance available to me. And there is a lot out there, and most of it is for free. Another issue, and this is something that could be shared like through the city website or just making sure, especially if you're a small like business technical assistance provider like I was at RSU, is also making sure that your retailers understand the different types of capital that they're able to access. Because traditional lending through banks is not the only way. There are some other programs out there that can help your retailers get the money that they need to either start the business, or if they're in a period where they're needing to expand, that option is available out there as well. And retailers, this kind of goes along with, keeping yourself learning, right? Going to trainings, getting technical assistance. One of the things that I see most small businesses lack, and this is not just retailers, it's almost all of the small businesses I've worked with, is that they're not consistently using market research tools to keep tabs on the market. And things are always constantly changing. So making sure that you understand what market research tools are available out there and how that you can use them to make better business decisions. Learning how to develop strategies like e-commerce, okay? And that was mentioned. E-commerce is a huge thing, and it can be very devastating, as we know. But then I've also seen some small retailers that embraced e-commerce and are doing very well at it. So I think e-commerce is definitely something that we need to help the retailers understand, develop, and be able to maneuver that kind of system very well. To use market research and the information that they gather, not only through secondary research, which by the way is research that kind of already exists out there, but also through primary research, doing surveys, doing focus groups, and things of that nature, so that they can develop better advertising strategies and possibly even learn ways to expand their products and services. And I'll give you an example. How's my time?
You're good.
Okay.
Couple more minutes.
Okay.
The more you talk, the less we have to.
Okay.
We want to get questions.
I don't want to take up too much time. But I will tell you about this one interesting client. She lives in Bishop, California. She's a member of the Bishop Paiute tribe. And she had a home cleaning business. And she's like, I need some help, like marketing or something, because I'm just not, I need more customers. Things are just going really slow. So I helped her with some market research. And through that market research, you know what we found? She didn't need to be cleaning houses. They have so many tourists coming through their area, RV travelers, RV parks, that now that is the focus of her business. So she does RV cleaning, and she's going gangbusters. So, just through market research, we were able to identify a whole new opportunity that she was able to take advantage of. And so as an existing business, a lot of people think, oh, well, you do market research when you start. You do, but it's something that you have to keep constantly growing so that you can innovate. And some of those market research tools, there's a lot of them out there, but they do different things. There's tools that can help you identify, look at your customers and your competitors, keep up to date on industry trends, and also some tools out there that you can use that make the data that you gather a little bit more easier to understand. So if anyone is familiar with geographical information systems, and a lot of times, city planning departments use these, they are a wonderful tool for small businesses. And I can take data that I've pulled, put it into some kind of GIS system, and it's like, voila, oh my goodness, we didn't realize that there's a whole segment over here that's not even being served. This might be a great place for us to build a new location. And by the way, I will tell you that I noticed right now at this very time, there's another workshop, which is the Google Community Mapping Workshop. And so I have a feeling what he's teaching you in there is how to use the Google Maps. Google Maps has a fantastic tool that you can use and pull in different kinds of data. So I use Google Maps all the time to plot, where certain customers are located within a community. And it's not nearly as powerful as like an Esri GIS system, but it is something that's free and it is something that can help. So if you're a small retailer, it's something that's fairly easy to learn, and it's something that you could utilize as part of your development and growth strategy. Then I also mentioned secondary research, and so we've all been someplace where maybe we fill out a survey at a restaurant or something, and that's great. But sometimes these retailers and different entrepreneurs, they really don't understand how to do primary research or how to do it correctly. And in fact, I just worked with a member that's a young lady, my sister, who's a member of Cherokee Nation. She wanted to actually start a daycare for children with medical disabilities. And we pulled a lot of primary research that already existed. It was very supportive. We started doing some secondary research, contacting the schools, seeing how many kids they had enrolled that had disabilities. And it was all looking really great. And then in the end, we actually did quite a large survey process where we were surveying families that had handicapped children. And in the end, what that data brought back to us is, this would be such a great service, but the cost to take care of these kind of kids and the market that they had there in Tahlequah just wasn't going to support it. And I don't consider, when we go through processes like that and people find information that says, wow, this isn't going to work, I consider that a win. Because you don't want those people investing their life savings or something into something that is going to fail. So, she's not going to do that at the time, but maybe in the future there can be a way she can get some work around and do something different. Okay. So there's another workshop taking place here, making data work for your community. I would suggest any of the community leaders and even independent retailers to kind of look at that. I think it's important to make sure that you are, again, providing information to your community. A lot of communities like Claremore, their website, their CETA has a lot of great demographic information that's available. And this past summer, through Cherokee Nation, I actually worked with them and developed some sample community profile templates. So for the smaller communities that they don't have a community profile, there is this resource available out there. It already has tables put together for you. It has instructions on where to pull that data from, and we were very made sure to focus on trying to use as many free resources as possible. So I guess just to wrap up my comments, growing retail in your community, there's all these different players that have to participate and take part.
And I had one thing to say about a comment about promoting, one another. The tea sector in Nowata recently sponsored a booyah run, and so they went around to some of the businesses and made the suggestion that they might want to offer some kind of a coupon or a discount thing. And so several of the restaurants took advantage of that, and then also someone who was doing a haunted house. And it takes everybody working together.
Yes, it
That
does.
was a good opportunity to do that.
Great, thanks, Lynn. Well, we'll take questions at the end. And so next on our panel, we've got John Ferry. And John became the executive director of the Claremore Industrial Economic Development Authority just this past February, and is engaged in quality job recruitment and manufacturing, along with county-wide retail efforts throughout Rogers County. John's worked in the government relations arena for Tulsa County and the city of Owasso, and has been chairman of the One Voice Committee and been very active in the community. So, John, what you're.
Is it okay if I
Sure.
sit? Are you all okay with that? Is that,
Yeah.
if I stand up, I'm gonna make this guy's life very difficult because I tend to wander, so I prefer not to do that. But thank you all for having me here. As Brian mentioned, I've got somewhat of a unique background, primarily in government affairs and, believe it or not, public infrastructure. So I spent about 10 years of my professional life in Owasso watching that retail growth, while my wife, who is the economic development director in Owasso, and I partnered up with a lot of things. And so to kind of tie into some of the things that Lynn just talked about, and I'll get off the collaboration she mentioned is important. She also mentioned the resources. I don't know what the makeup in the room is. Who here is from a municipality? Okay. Who's here from an EDA or EDO of some sort? Private sector, most everybody. Okay. So be that point of contact for all of your businesses, big or small, manufacturing, retail. If you're the economic development person, or if you need to go back to your respective organization, have somebody who is that point of contact that can get them through every facet and every bit of red tape. It's the biggest hang up that you'll see, and once you get past that and people know where to go, it will be your biggest asset. And the appreciation that you'll get from your prospective new retailers, your manufacturers, will be, well, it'll reap rewards for you. So I'll say that because it's a great idea. The Innovation Center at RSU did a lot of things. But I had the luxury of sitting back and making sure that infrastructure and things of that nature, as well as the legislature staying out of our way in Owasso, were things that were able to help us grow over a period of many years. There's also been some success there with the Macy's, which was mentioned earlier. But one of the things that we're talking about and focusing on this panel is our existing businesses and how they truly are the backbone of our communities, big or small. And that's just the fact of it. Whether it is a large-scale, heavy industrial manufacturing business, whether it's the mom and pop diner that's been there forever, 85+% around that area of your new investment in your community is going to come from people and entities that are already there. So it's very important to keep those things in mind as you're going out and you're trying to do retail recruitment specifically. Brian touched on the fact that Oklahoma has a very antiquated method of funding its municipalities. I will say another thing that you as a group can do is always stay engaged with your legislators to fix things like that, those shortcomings. The only state in the nation that requires us to fund operations of municipalities off of sales tax, the most volatile and irresponsible method to fund operations ever. So that's enough of my political high horse. It's been a priority of mine for years, 5 or 6 years. It's been at the top of the One Voice agenda for the Tulsa Regional Chamber. I know Nora's been engaged with it. We need strong and healthy communities from a fiscal standpoint in order to make sure that our business communities can be successful. So some of the things that I was asked to talk about too are the needs and the desires when retailers, certainly and specifically sometimes the big box folks come in. We're in a unique position in a community that I live in and now that I work in are similar in nature. One's just about 10 or 12 years behind the other. And that's not a bad thing, that's just how things happen. So when you have a community like Claremore, which is frankly somewhat now saturated with retail. Yes, we celebrate the Chick-fil-A's and we do the things that get them there, but when it comes right down to it, it's all the same money. It's not a lot of new money. You're just kind of spreading it all out. It's just people not eating at KFC and things of that nature. So you have to be very tactical. You have to be intentional and strategic with how you recruit and how you incent. I will tell you that in a community like ours, right now, incenting new retail is not something that we're really in the market to do. I will say there are other communities in Rogers County that we work with, that we have some county dollars and we utilize a consultant out of Birmingham, Alabama, and we focus on countywide retail. Now we'll go into communities like Chelsea and say, okay, here's what you want, but what are your needs, and then what will the market dictate? And the city of Chelsea, per se, will say, well, we have a lot that's right on the highway that the city owns. Perfect spot for some sort of quick service restaurant, a Sonic, a McDonald's. Okay, let's talk about what you can do incentive-wise, and that's to offer that piece of land for free, and let's look at what the potential earnings are going to be in your return on investment. So there are some things that you can do in your smaller communities where you know you're never going to get a power center, you're not going to get the academies or the Lowe's or the things of that nature. But you need to be very strategic and intentional. You don't want to sell yourself down the river. And there's a lot of different arguments for consultants and if you should incent retail and if you shouldn't. My background when I was with Tulsa County years ago was an appraiser. Appraisal is basically the definition of it is an opinion about 8 people can look at the same piece of property, take the same data, and come up with 8 different numbers for that piece of property. Economic development from a retail standpoint is a lot of the same way, okay? Each different community is very, very different. You kind of take the same data sets, but you apply those, but each community is different. You cannot take a mass appraisal approach to economic development just because you're a municipality, just because you're a chamber or an EDO. So be mindful of those things. Big box retailers, I'm sorry I veered off one rabbit trail. Big box retailers certainly interested in a lot of things. Certainly median home value in your community is something that you should always have on hand. Household median income is something, and all of this data is readily available. Census data, the nation does a great job of keeping up with these things. OESC, a lot of different resources for this stuff. These are things that these retailers want to know. And the reason they want to know those things, obviously, can the people that live there afford to shop here? I mean, that's just the simple economics of it. They also want to know, when's the last time you had a new housing startup? What's your new home construction doing? What's your lot availability? All of these things go into, and not just for your retailers, that's also for your manufacturers. We all know we're suffering from a terrible workforce issue right now. People think, oh, you have low unemployment. That's fantastic. But when I have restaurants that can't hire servers, that's an issue. When I have manufacturers whose criteria now is to maybe pass a drug test or just show up most of the time on time, that's the criteria we're getting to. So it's important for those economic indicators that that I just mentioned. You know, like I said, median home value, median household income, and also the health of a community. We get a lot of conversations about, you know, what access to health care is there, what's kind of the demographic and makeup of the overall health. And that's tough. You can look at it from a region, but if somebody asks me what it is in Claremore, I don't know. Because I've got this broad picture of what, you know, here's the average across the state or here's the average across the region. So we're doing some things now to identify those things. We're actually going to come in and do a very specific Rogers County, Claremore-centric workforce and labor study. Have that data available. Commuter patterns and commuter studies. Those are things that a lot of people don't think about. But whether it's retail or commercial, hey, how hard is it to get to work? How quick can you be here? I was just in Southern California on a recruiting trip. A 44-mile trip was 100+ minutes. You all know that I can get in a car right now and drive 100 minutes and be in Oklahoma City close to. Well, I could. I'd probably speed a little. But so there's some things like that you should know. But it's just be ready for all of these questions. If there's a piece of data out there that you think might be pertinent to anybody that wants to make a significant investment in your community, have it on hand. And the other thing is update it. And I don't mean go spend the money every year, every 2 years, but have data that's somewhat relevant. If somebody asks you, well, what's your median home value, and you pull up the 2010 census, that's not really helping you a lot, especially communities like in Rogers County, which is the second fastest growing, county in the state. So communities like Owasso, where home value has just gone up rapidly, and then you have communities like Claremore or Rogers County, which is unique, where our median home value isn't where it should be. Our household median income is going up a little bit. But when you look at how much money it takes for companies to qualify for quality jobs, that annual salary is pretty high. We're kind of unique because of our manufacturing base. So you have to make about $50,000 a year to qualify for state incentives on quality jobs. Yet, frankly, when you drive through parts of our community and you see some of the socioeconomic makeup of our community and the retailers that are there, you wouldn't think that we had a big $50,000 a year job situation in our community. So know some things about your big retailers. That's always, very important. Most of that information is very proprietary, but you can go to the Tax Commission's website. Most communities have this. It's free of charge if you qualify for some things, and you can subscribe to it. But know how much your Walmart, if you had one, did in sales last year. Now, don't tell somebody, but you can have an idea that here's what our general goods retailers did, here's what our home stores did, here's what our fast food, our hamburger fast food restaurant. People will know who you're talking about, but be careful. You don't want to cross over those lines, but have that information available. Have information on hand, like our Walmart did $20 million more last year than their national average. Stuff like that. Tell them that our McDonald's restaurants did double what the national average is across the country. Stuff like that, when you're talking about retail, they want to hear those things. But again, some of this emphasis, or a lot of this emphasis, is on your existing businesses. We touched on some things, some national trends that Brian put together. It's absolutely the case. The most successful things going on in our community right now are the boutique shops, the mom and pop shops. You're seeing those pop up on Main Street. I get several inquiries now, even along Route 66, of Rogers County specific businesses. We have a gentleman that wants to do something kind of like what Ida Red is in Tulsa, where it's all Oklahoma goods and Tulsa-based goods, and he wants to do something along those lines. We are going to continue to see online sales surge. That's just going to happen. Now, I also don't believe it's the end of the world. It's not the retail apocalypse like people have said. I've had people that went to ICSC this last year and said, lowest attended show they ever went to, and I had other people say it was the best show they ever went to. It's just a matter of what your community needs and what you desire. Frankly, if you're a community in Rogers County that is not Claremore or Catoosa, you love the fact that Casey's is doing what Casey's is doing across Oklahoma. Okay, you love the fact that Sonic is looking for places in those smaller towns on high traffic impact areas right off of state highways. Those, and frankly, those are game changers for those communities. They really are. They absolutely are. So be partners with it. And it's what that does too. That allows us to diversify and help those communities with a collaborative effort from not just a let's make the region better, but from a funding aspect. If you have a limited amount of funding and things that you can direct towards those resources, build those coalitions and say, okay, everybody puts in a little and let's work together, and that's just part of that leaving your ego at the door and saying this is best for the region. Because I know that where I'm from, the majority of people are going to drive into Claremore to shop. And if we don't have it there, then they're going to leave my community and they're going to go to Owasso or Catoosa. Those are the challenges that I have to have. So for me, it's going out and going, all right, I need the PetSmart, I need the Hobby Lobby, I need and that's very difficult when, these stores make multi-million-dollar investments 10, 12 minutes from it. It's just very difficult. So how do you stop that loss? Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you just have to go, okay, how can we help a local shop that does the same thing? How can we empower them? How can we help them grow their business? To what Lynn said earlier, it's very important. Let's give you the resources and the tools to be successful so you can compete with the Michaels or the Hobby Lobbies or, we've got a couple of grocery stores in Claremore and people go, we need more. Well, do we want more or do we really need more? It's not necessarily good for the city coffers if we have more grocery stores, but it's more convenient for the folks. And so that's the other thing. Be very careful when you talk about wants versus needs with your retail companies. You'll have people that will come in, we want to be here, what are you going to give us? First of all, if they picked up the phone and called you, they've already looked at your market, they want to be there, they know it's feasible, they can make some money. Now it's just negotiate. Whether that's get a sewer line to their property, a water line, or if they want you to write a big check. I'm not here to say you should or should not do those things. Every community, again, is different. It's just the opinion. But be mindful, be intentional, be responsible, and remember that it's taxpayer dollars. And I say that because I guarantee it, they'll all love it, but if that thing doesn't work or falls flat on its face in a year and a half or 2 years, you're the one that screwed it up. That's the public perception. We are sitting with a 35-acre spread of land it's probably going to be the last power center, if it ever gets built, in the city of Claremore. They've been messing around with it for 10 years. It's cost tons of people millions of dollars. And it's kind of that big, and right now, if I had to put I'd say it's 50-50 something's going to happen with it. But what a retailer or developer tells you is going on and what's actually going on are often two different things too. But stay the course. That's the thing. But you have that information available. Also, keep them apprised for your big box and potential new development and for your already existing. Here's what's going on with the latest transportation. Here's our land use master plan. Here's the latest adopted land plan. It's important to those people when, because let's face it, you can have as many public meetings as you want. You can do online surveys. You can put stuff in the utility bills. Most people, if their water gets turned on when they turn the knob or their trash gets picked up once a week, they don't really pay that much attention. It's when those things don't happen that they start to engage their community leaders. So when they show up one day and go, what are they doing out here? Oh, they're staking that new Highway 20 bypass that's going right through your backyard. Nobody told me. Well, there's going to be an on-ramp here. We're going to get a new this there. While you would think that's good for the community as a whole, it adversely affects somebody, whether it be their home or their business. So be engaged, do what you can, and also realize that you're never going to make everybody happy. But those are the things. Keep your transportation plan updated. Make sure your prospects, if you have a consultant, if you're working with a big box or a developer, make sure they know where those things are. And more importantly, make sure your community knows where those things are. Life is easier for everybody if you have the engagement by your citizens. And so, to kind of sum it up, I'd say, well, I've got a few minutes. Okay. I would just say be intentional, be strategic, be responsible. Do what you have to do to make your community, your business successful, but do it in a way that you support your local folks that have really, kind of the bulwarks of your community. Because the people in the community that I work in and the people in the community that I live in, they built that town 100 years ago. Their families are still there, and you can't not support those businesses. And so while you want to grow, we all want those things, you have to be very mindful because those are the same people that can really thwart a lot of your efforts. So I'm sure there's some questions later if I missed that. But collaboration, remove the red tape, be the point of contact for those folks, keep your information updated, and keep an updated record of your available properties. I will tell you right now, that's probably one of the biggest things that we've really started to focus on.
Great information. Thanks, John. Next, and the final panelist today is Stephen Hires. And Stephen brings over 10 years of experience in mass communications, marketing, leadership, and public relations to the Cherokee Nation Small Business Assistance Center, which Lynn touched on earlier. Stephen oversees the center and the entrepreneurial development, business coaching programs, which provide economic, business, community development, and financing opportunities to Native American-owned businesses. He's been actively involved in community relations throughout Northeast Oklahoma and markets the center throughout the region. So help me welcome Steve. Oh, I just was over here.
I don't know how to advance.
You just tell me when.
This might be the only slides. Well, it's a pleasure meeting with you all today. I hope we've heard some really great information from both of the speakers. One kind of focused on entrepreneurship, and the other focused on more of the big box industry. And hopefully, what I can do is help kind of be that bridge in what we're doing with the Cherokee Nation within the 14 counties, specifically within commerce and within a portion of commerce which we have, which is our CDFI, which is the Cherokee Nation Economic Development Trust Authority, and the work that we're doing with the Trust Authority. So I just kind of have the slideshow I'm going to go through real fast because it's kind of a generic overview of what we're doing in commerce, and then I'll get kind of more in depth as we go. So commerce, the mission of the Cherokee Nation Commerce and the Economic Development Trust Authority is enhancing the security of our Cherokee citizens, businesses, and communities. So we do that in a lot of ways. A lot of what we're focused on is capacity building and entrepreneurship, which is what Lynn talked about. But then we also are doing a lot with communities and getting communities and visiting with communities and allowing them to give them the tools that they need to understand what it is that they need to go out, what their community can support, things like that, and helping them to get better. So these are a few of the things that we're doing: capacity building workshops, business planning, the retail incubator space here in Tahlequah, artist incubator, all of those fun things, community tourism. We also have we run the Cherokee Bids, which is a procurement site. So if you have businesses wanting to do business with the Cherokee Nation, it's a great way to help kind of plug in and help a revenue stream for them. You can go past that because that's a consumer. So the Cherokee Nation, the Economic Development Trust Authority, we're a certified CDFI, community development financial institution, and what we're doing is we're a lending institution. So we're able to help citizens within the 14 counties of the Cherokee Nation, offer them commercial lending, small consumer, and foreclosure prevention. We have about well, this slide hasn't been updated, but we have about an $8 million portfolio where we are now. And what we're doing is we're working with individual entrepreneurs. So a barrier to a lot of communities within the 14 counties of Northeast Oklahoma, the rural communities, is being able to obtain financing. You know, banks are notorious for not wanting to finance new construction. Banks aren't wanting to finance restaurants. Banks aren't wanting to finance a lot of those type of initiatives, especially as the market and the financial regulations and all of those fun things are setting in, and that affects us here in rural Oklahoma. So what the Cherokee Nation Economic Development Trust Authority is doing is providing that funding or partnering with the bank or the financial institution to make it easier for them to be able to give money to the end recipient, which is the citizen out within the 14 counties. So this is just a little bit about our commercial lending. Since 2010, we actually just ended our fiscal year, so these numbers are actually more. We're now up over 11,000 jobs within the 14 counties. Instead of 8.1 million in loans, we're now over 10 million, and our capacity building is just over 10,000 participants. So you can see in our fiscal year how we've grown and what we're doing. Most of the people think it's a small and pop. Look at development differently. You think it's a small mom and pop store within a community. But if you look at this, since 2010, those small mom and pop stores within the 14 counties that just the Cherokee Nation Economic Development Trust Authority has helped create over 1,100 jobs within those 14 counties. And that's a substantial amount of jobs. Not everybody's going to have that Macy's come to them. Not everybody's going to be able to move that new Walmart in or those new big box stores into our small rural communities, but you can put 2 or 3 small businesses in, strengthen your main street, put a cluster of entrepreneurship development that's happening and create those jobs organically. Because as you're building, as you're seeing success and people are going, they're going to play off each other. One boutique, another boutique is going to open up down the street, and they should complement each other. Restaurants, as restaurants are successful, they will come in and start complementing each other. So that's really where we pride ourselves on. We do it, just to give a plug now for my organization, we do it through a flexible lending criteria, low income micro loans, youth programs, low cost, in-house loan servicing. And so we really work with businesses. Our whole goal is to really work with a business to make them very successful. Because as anybody says, you don't want, as Lynn said, you don't want to put life savings into a business and the business be a failure. And so sometimes what we're doing and working with entrepreneurs is saying, what you want to do won't work. It won't work. Let's change it up a little bit. Let's change our scope. And I think that's a perfect example of what Lynn gave with the maid looking at houses, but now going to RVs. It's looking at that market research, holding the hand of the entrepreneur, allowing them to really put on paper what it is that they're trying to do, what it is that they're trying to accomplish. One of the things that we see with entrepreneurs is they've got it all up here. Up here, it all makes sense, and they're, going to be the next Walmart. But when you put it on paper, it doesn't, there's a lot of gaps that need to be filled. And that's what we do through the Cherokee Nation and trying to be that gap for allowing them to think it out, to be able to go and to put it all into place. And thus far, we've been very successful. This is a little bit of our consumer lending. Sometimes what we have seen with business lending is the consumer comes to us and they're just not in a financial position to be able to, in a personal financial position to be able to go into a commercial atmosphere. And so what we do is we have to take care of the personal side, the consumer side of them first. And so we have that lending capability. But I won't spend much time on it because it's not really what we're here today. And then economic tourism and development, working with our community partners, working with organizations, working with our towns that are out there to strengthen what they're doing and to help strengthen their entrepreneur efforts. Because, you know, every one of these festivals, every one of these concerts, every one of these community organizations, that's really what you're doing, is you're strengthening your entrepreneur cluster within your community. You're strengthening your system. So you're bringing people in to help strengthen that. And then hopefully they like it, they come back, they stay, they do those type of things. So, and then that's that. So we're done. So really that's where we're talking about. The other thing that we talk about is community engagement and working with communities. So we've talked about entrepreneur piece, and now let's talk about communities. Cherokee Nation Commerce is helping and can help communities to understand how your community is playing and how we can, and how you can attract businesses. So we can what we did is we did it with Tammy actually, and we can do that throughout all 14 counties, and we can help you with, we have the tools available to give you the gap analysis and the market research to be able to come in and understand what is in your community and what your community needs to grow. You know, a lot of people let's talk with the grocery store chain. You know, one of the things when we found in Tahlequah, the data shows that Tahlequah could support a new grocery store. One of the things when you actually talk to people in Tahlequah, a grocery store is hardly ever on the list of things that people see as needed within the community. So the needs of the community don't always line up with the perception of the community, and I think that's where community individuals, the leaders of the communities, need to understand, and they need to have the data to be able to support, and that is something that we can offer through the Cherokee Nation Commerce. And we do it all free of charge. It's something that's the important part of that process is, you know, you can, I'm not from Lynn, she's a consultant, so when I say consultant, we'll all turn to Lynn and say, boo, no, I'm just playing. Lynn is very good. Lynn has helped us in the Cherokee Nation. Yeah, Lynn has helped us with the Cherokee Nation, and probably if you come to us, Lynn is who you'll get to see do a lot of this stuff, because she's worked very well with us. But a lot of times consultants, they come in and they charge a lot of money to pull the lists and to read the data. You know, we can all pull a list and we can all read the data, and that's something that we can do to really help with the Cherokee Nation. And Lynn is the expert in market research. If you need a market research person, come to Lynn. So you get the data, and that's what we've done in the partnership with Lynn, is she's done a lot of market research and actually helped, you know, say these things are feasible and this is where it can grow. And the other thing, you know, one of the things that we're talking about in expanding retail, you never know what is out there that can grow and where the next big growth opportunity for your community is. And that's why I would say, look at the businesses that are in your community and see how you can help them expand. The last thing I have an example of that here in Tahlequah, and then I'll sit down and we can go to questions, and you can ask the experts on the panel questions, and I'll sit here and look nice. But a prime example of that is a business here in Tahlequah. It's called Backwoods Foods. It came to us. It was a small business. She had an idea, and she wanted to open a kitchen in her home, and so that she could you know, create food with that she did. And we gave her a small seed loan. It did so well that a couple of years later she came back to us and wanted to now build a business still on her property, but a larger kitchen and a line to be able to package what she was doing. So we gave her another small loan. She came back to us probably 5 years later in a partnership with the SBA Bank First, and she's now in the Tahlequah Industrial Authority, in the Tahlequah Industrial Park. It was a $1.4 million business venture that she's doing, and now she's selling Game Busters all over the state of Oklahoma and all over the United States, her own product and packaging for other people, putting the labels on food products for other people as well. And that's just over a 10-year period that business has grown. And if you would have thought at the very beginning, when she came to us wanting the kitchen in her house, that her business was gonna grow. Nobody would. That Danielle, would have just laughed you right out of this room. But you know, she was an entrepreneur and she had a dream, and that dream took off. And it took off with the support of her resource partner, it took off with the support of her community, it took off with the support of her bank. And so it's all of us together playing that role of support for these entrepreneurs in our communities that allow these businesses to grow and that'll make our communities better tomorrow than they are today. So thank you all very much for allowing me to be here. We can open it up to questions. Be ready for lunch, whatever we want to do.
So we've got a little bit of time. They're actually not going to open the banquet facility until 11:30. A couple of things before we start questions. The presentations that you saw today will be uploaded to the NORA website, so we'll get you those. And wow, what a great panel! Please help me in thanking all three panelists today. So lots of key takeaways. I heard several things. For communities, make sure you've got current and updated information. That is so key, starting with your website. Try to cross-pollinate with utility departments and other places where people go to pick up information. Market research is key. Lots of free resources, as well as Department of Commerce and Esri GIS. There is an interesting website that you might Google and look up. It's Esri, E-S-R-I, and then Tapestry, T-A-P-E-S-T-R-Y, zip code. And from there you can enter a zip code, and Esri has put together what they call a tapestry, in which you can generate all kinds of data about housing starts and demographics and median income. But this is in a little bit more of a narrative. And it's a little easier to follow in terms of who are the people that, who are the consumers in your marketplace? What are their lifestyles like? What types of television do they watch? What are their political preferences? What do they typically spend money on? So that's a great resource. Also, GRDA, as you all know, does a lot in the community and other utilities like that. We heard from John, always have a point of contact, the 85% rule. That's where a Backwood Foods is going to come from. And make sure you know all of your sales volumes and the critical things that people that are looking for either a piece of land or a building need to know, because we all want more Backwood Foods at the end of the day. It's a great story to end the presentation on, Stephen, in terms of kind of growing your own. So with that, I'll open it up for questions that you have for any of the panelists.
I've got two or three.
Okay.
First one's cost of
Pryor,
living.
you have to introduce yourself.
Jimmy Trammell, Mayor Pryor. Yes, sir. Cost of living index, when you look at utilities, you put that out there also on Claremore or anywhere else, and what your cost of living is, how much your utility rates are compared to other towns when you do your comparison?
We publish our utility rates. The cost of living wages or rate, I don't publish, but I have readily available when asked for it. So, we're unique that Oklahoma is some of the cheapest utilities in the country. And some communities are not as cheap as others, unfortunately. But yeah, utility rates are something that you need to know, as well as your cost of living per household. And that's a big detractor. I mean, that right up there with that median household income. If they say, oh, your median household income in Rogers County is $46,000, but your cost of living is $51,000, it's a concern. You need to be looking at your communities and your region, saying, what can we do? How to fix this?
A couple other questions. You got to know wants versus needs. I've talked to Lowe's, and I've talked to Pryor's not going to get a low. We just don't meet the minimum criteria. You got to recognize that fact. The biggest struggle that we have is building codes. Building codes. Everybody's supposed to adopt the 2015 state building codes. Okay? And you're kind of unique. You got regional zoning in Claremore, Rogers County. Most of us don't have. And so that's kind of unique, because just the prime example is there's a business trying to go in Pryor that Cherokee Nation has loaned money to. They're not going to be able to build this building because he brings me a plan on a piece of paper, and you say, you've got to have fire code, you've got to have A, B, C, D, and E. He's absolutely going berserk because there's no development. Building codes is one of the key things that nobody understands. ADA requirements, what you have to do for what, you know, and other things like that, and it's fire sprinkler system and stuff. But that's huge. So how do you get, I'm gonna ask that to Cherokee Nation, do you all require, somebody brings you a plan, do you require, say, do you meet the 2015 codes? Do you require a architect to provide that information? Because this individual's just not gonna build that building, and I don't know what's gonna happen, because, I mean, and now I'm getting a black eye because we're not friendly. You know, we're not community friendly, but let's face it, you know, he doesn't want to pay, he wants to use the existing parking lot on the sidewalk as his parking, you know. He doesn't want to meet stormwater requirements because he's, you know, stormwater. And so there's a lot of things there that a lot of people don't realize. My question is, Cherokee Nation, do you require that?
Sure, so it's not, I mean, it'd be hard to say we require it, as much as it's working with the entrepreneur and understanding, you know, that's one of the things that we talk in working with the entrepreneur. That's one of the first things that we talk about as the business coach that's working with them as they're going to get the loan is this a feasible project? You know, can you build what you want? You know, and so it would just depend on the loan and the client that you're using. That you're
Because I tell you, you know,
probably what's happened is, you know, I don't know what this situation is, but we've worked through it with him or them, and you know, when they came to us with the loan process, it was everything's fine and dandy, but we find out like
great idea, great idea, but
Yeah.
his cost is going to go up another 12 to 14%, and he just doesn't have that money, you know. So he popped me over the head, he hit me on Facebook and everything else, and I'm not being friendly, and you know, that's one of the problems. Now, the last thing I'll say is you got to know wants versus needs. We're kind of unusual because I don't encourage our stores to be open on Saturdays. For the simple reason, if you look at our study, we want most people in Pryor go out of town on the weekends. Our slowest retail day is Saturday and Sunday. It's kind of surprising. Most of them went in the mornings, 11 o'clock, very retail. So we encourage our people to open up at 11 o'clock, stay open till 7, you know. And Saturdays is just, you know, because that's what we found out, that it's just not a good retail day, and you just pay for utilities. And you've seen a huge difference in our sales because, you know, it's like what you said, I can look at anybody's sales tax every day because I have the liberty of going in and look, see what you're doing, what you're not doing. And it's amazing when we go talk to these people how much their sales tax has changed, their sales, because they're now not opening now until 11 o'clock, and they're not open Saturdays. It's increased people around there. Then you get,
And that goes back to what works in your individual
That's right.
community. No project, no community is the same. And so that works in your community. There's some communities that's not feasible,
right.
but for you all, and that's a good model. And you're telling your folks, you're being a good community partner, saying, here's when we think you're going to do well, and they're seeing that fruition. Real quick, to jump back to the first thing, because you're kind of in my wheelhouse with my infrastructure background. So, one, I get it. Because this is being taped, I won't tell you my thoughts on the Uniform Commercial Building Code
You're not talking
or
about
the
the-
Business and Commerce Committee in the state
You're not even
Senate.
talking about your corner.
Yeah, and the labor unions and the trades, how the influence they've had over the years. But yes, the thing is, because we've all dealt with that, and at some point, bottom line is, you have a lot of autonomy in your individual communities to change codes. What you cannot do is do anything that is less intrusive or less, I almost said the word sadistic because that's what comes to mind. But there's a state building code. Oftentimes they tie it all back to life safety, fire marshal. I don't care if your fire marshal works for you and he's been there 40 years, he's not going to go against Fire Marshals Association, the state building code and all those things. So it's just educating those folks. Look, I want to help you. You want to change it, go down and talk to the Business and Commerce Committee of the Senate, because that's where most of those bills go, the building and trades unions, and they're all good people, but they do things to make sure that they have a successful industry, and oftentimes that's some of that red tape and those things that we have to get around. We had an opportunity in Claremore to turn an old community center or senior citizen center into arguably one of the premier restaurants in the area right now. We owned the building. We did an RFQ. We had somebody come in and give us a proposal. They spent $2 million of their own money on a building that they'll never own. And is what we did for that incentive part is we said, okay, it's got to have this. We spent $38,000 on a fire suppression system. Pretty good investment, by the way, because that place has done about $2 million worth of sales in less than a year. But it's those same things. We had to put that in. I mean, it was a no-go.
That was
And
through your
that's-
Economic Development Authority, not through the city.
That is correct. Economic Development Authority did that. But educate your investor and say, look, we want to do these things, but we want to be friendly. We can't just break the rules either. You can't park on the sidewalk. You can't cause downstream flooding issues. You can't, impervious area has to be detained for water. Those are just things that, trust me, it's a hell of a lot cheaper than your neighbor suing you. I promise you.
You're right there. Well, why do you think this? Why do you think that the fire departments are no longer, they've got into the ambulance service? Because they put so much safety regulation. We're doing a survey right now. How many fires? There's not that many fires anymore. They go to in the outside. What there is, the ambulance service, the firemen, fire departments now the ambulance service because
They're first responders.
They're first responders. That's what it amounts to because the life safety codes, there's just not that many. It's going to be interesting to see. We're doing a survey. How many fire calls that Claremore has, but outside your corporate boundaries, outside the city limits. And it's amazing to see how many of those are outside city limits. Now we're supporting the county, not just the city.
And Pryor's unique. I mean, you
Just
all,
so Claremore and everybody else.
you all have a gem in the Mid-America Industrial Park. I mean, so where you can turn around and look at those types of things for your quality jobs, and maybe retail's not the forte. But in my opinion, economic development for our area right now is not more retail where I'm at. It's quality jobs, it's manufacturing, it's fabrication and aerospace and all those things. And that's where the focus, because if I can get the jobs in, get the rooftops up, that's going to support our local retailers that are already there and our existing businesses. We're reinvesting in them, and they appreciate that.
Other questions?
You mentioned during your presentation sort of helping a budding entrepreneur get to know occasionally as a service, helping somebody avoid a bad idea and eventually wind up with a good idea. I'm curious for all three of you actually, the sort of ongoing support services that are available for somebody that's figuring out the restaurant business or figuring out that boutique business. You get to the point where you get sort of the funding that you need, the store gets open, things are you have that grand opening or ribbon cutting or whatever else it is, and then 6 months, a year later, what's sort of out there and available for those folks for kind of ongoing support to get better at business, to continue to understand the changes in their market? How does that support network
Thank you,
function?
Andy.
Yeah, great question. Lynn, you want to tackle it?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to tackle that. I remember I would say I have this client that I had always worked with, and I'm not going to release anything confidential, but I think I can tell his name. He's like always been a spokesperson for the Education Center, and his name was Bruce Parks. And that man, for 10 years, was my client. And let me tell you, he would call me up on the phone, man, Lynn, I'm having this troubles. I can't keep a schedule of where everybody is. Oh yeah, Bruce, do you have Outlook on your computer? Well, I don't know, let me see. I do. You know what, let me run over to your office real quick. And I still hear him tell that story that it's just, for small businesses to have, you have to have a mentor. And so to seek out people like the services at Cherokee Nation and their business counselors or Northeast Technology Center, and to make those people an ongoing mentor that you can pick up the phone and call with any little bitty issue that there is. Those are the entrepreneurs that are going to make it and succeed. Those are the successful people.